the benefits and drawbacks of analog versus digital controls in the car. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by MacVoices Live, our weekly live panel discussion of what is going on in the Apple space, as well as the larger tech world, and how it is impacting you. Join us live at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, or whatever time that is wherever you are, at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV, and participate in the chat, or catch the edited and segmented versions of the show on the regular MacVoices channels and feeds. So sort of on a related topic, in a way, at least in my twisted mind, is a story that Volkswagen is returning to physical buttons instead of touch controls. So I think we've maybe had some of these discussions in the distant past. I think there are some controls, personally, I think there's some controls that are better analog than digital because you can reach up and touch them, no pun intended, and adjust them, by feel, especially if you're in the car, like the volume. I've had stereos that had a digital control for the volume, and it was a pain. I wanted my analog button back. And so, this return to an analog situation when we just finished discussing a fully virtual environment where there would be no analog controls unless you start requiring people or equipping them to use a mouse or a trackpad or something as a way of controlling the virtual environment. That doesn't sound like a horrible solution, but it also doesn't feel like it's a very completely integrated solution. So I was curious to see if anybody else had any competing thoughts or contrasting thoughts on this.
I completely agree with VW. Honestly, I have enough problems just getting through the CarPlay Apple Music menus. If I had to do that to get my AC on or do other needed car, functions that should be relatively easily, honestly, that is distracting the driver from looking at the road.
Okay. Which, Ben, I personally think that CarPlay does a pretty good job, especially with Apple's native apps, of not requiring you to dig through 10 different menus to get to the setting you're looking for. You only have to go 1, 2, maybe 3 levels deep to get to, something. And for the majority of the uses, I would put it to while I'm driving.
Well, this is sort of an ongoing, drama, I guess, in the car world right now. I mean, Tesla sort of established the everything on a screen, and they're continuing to double down on that. Now their new cars don't even have stalks for turning, and you're going to have to use the screen to go and drive neutral or reverse. So they're not going to have a physical control for that either. And, and there are people that are just like, yeah, this is great. This is the future. And there's nothing in front of you on a Tesla. There's no speed display or anything. They have no heads-up display. Everything's on the big screen. And some of the other car manufacturers have been like, hey, that's a great idea. So Volvo is following that. Ford is following that. On the other hand, not everybody is. So VW is one. Hyundai has, they've still got lots of buttons. Personally, I think that, there's some things that are appropriate on the screen, and I want turn indicator stalks, and I like having this speedometer in front of me and whatnot. But I know that there's a lot of commenters online that if they were watching this, they'd be like, "Yeah, okay, Grandpa," and they would correctly say I'm an old person and that I'm a fuddy-duddy and, an idiot.
Well, 2 out of 3 maybe.
So, when Tesla first came out, I thought, oh, this is great. And an iPad, essentially that's, but I have, and although I've never spent much time in those cars, but I've come to think that, yeah, I don't think that's good to have everything. And, on a Tesla, you even have to go through menus to open the glove box. I think that's a little too far.
Jeff?
All right. Necessary functionality. That should be stuff that you can do without having to look at all. And actually, I'm going to expand that out now and say core functionality because part of the entertainment system, like listening to the radio, that's not a necessary function of a car, but it's one of the core things that people do all the time. So, yeah, Jim mentioned the steering column stalks. Okay, I can turn on and off my lights. I can run my windshield wipers. I mean, all of the core stuff like that. I never have to look to do it. I can open and close windows without looking, and I can shift without looking, and all of that stuff I can do without having to look at anything because I have the tactile thing. I can just feel where everything is, and if I'm off a little bit, it's no problem. It's a physical thing, and I can catch it anyhow. Heating, air conditioning, defroster, all of that you should be able to run without having to look at anything because these are core functions that at least in the case of defroster is necessary for safe operation of your car. Throw in the radio controls, at least volume, so that you don't have to fiddle with screen controls to change volume or radio station, whatever. But non-core functionality, sure, if you want to put that on some screen, fine. And I have not seen a touch-only interface for a car that I feel comfortable saying successfully addresses the safety issues of driving, being able to operate the vehicle without ever looking at a control.
Okay. Webb, you're a Tesla guy.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I got 5 cars, and I rotate them out all the time.
Expert.
And one of them is a Tesla. And you're right, they don't have stalks anymore. Turn signal are 2 soft buttons that are on the steering wheel you use with your left hand. Don't really like it, but I've come to get used to it. Keep in mind that a lot of the Tesla functionality, while there are menus and screens, they really want you to use the voice control whenever you can. And I think people kind of forget that, but I think that's one of the things that they try to do. I'll tell you the problem that I have is, say I want to change radio stations. And so it's very hard to change radio stations on the Tesla because it does know whether I'm going to go to the Sirius XM satellite radio or to the local FM station or go to one of the streaming services. So it gets really confused about that. The other thing that I don't think people talk about, and I think one of the things that Apple got right on CarPlay, if you're just looking at the main CarPlay interface, is what I call targeting. And that is why I'm sitting here driving the car and I need to do something. I have to take my hand off the steering wheel, get my finger and point and hit something. And I got to hit that sucker just right. Okay. If I'm above it, below it, or to the left or to the right, it's not going to work the way that I want it to. So that's kind of a problem that I see as targeting. What Apple does is that just like on the Apple phone, but on the car, those buttons to change the different functionalities are pretty good size. Okay. The latest car that I got is a 2024 Lexus, and it does have CarPlay on it, and it does have a touch screen for CarPlay. But those buttons, there's a word that Apple uses. I forget what they call them. They're easy to get to. It's when you go to the next step that I guess be a problem. When I go into music, I want to get to the Apple streaming service, Apple Music streaming. That can be kind of a problem sometimes. But here again, they kind of want you to use the voice interface and not the physical one. All that being said, I agree with you, Jeff, 100% that all the normal things do need to be analog and tactical, and I think that's why Volkswagen's going to it. But I also think they're trying to get some PR out of it, saying that they're going back to analog. By the way, the Lexus that I have, it has all analog controls for the ventilation system. The only thing that's the digital side, if you will, is going to be everything that's related to CarPlay or Lexus' own infotainment system. So that's probably the bulk of my comments. It's the targeting is the thing that gets to me. That when I'm trying to drive and trying to get to something, I'm hitting the screen 3 or 4 times trying to make little adjustments so I can get to the whatever function I'm trying to do. The other thing on the Tesla, by the way, if you look at the radio and volume, that's also an analog scroll button on the steering wheel as well, which is nice. But yeah, there's my experience. The Lexus interface on the 2024s, they got ridiculed for their infotainment. They had a touchpad type interface. They got ridiculed for it, and they got rid of it for this model year.
So help me out just a second, Webb. I want to make sure I understand. So if you decide that you want to listen to what we would call radio programming, so how many steps does it take? I mean, because I'm comparing it to, I guess, what I have or what I've had in cars before. So if I were to listen to Sirius XM, I have to make a selection and then that I'm choosing Sirius XM and then go find whichever station or channel on Sirius XM I want to listen to. If I want to listen to FM radio, I got to select FM radio and then make my station selection. Is it a similar situation with a Tesla? And is it that much different?
It's not on the Tesla. It is on the Lexus. So on the Lexus, I can have a selection of 6 different menu choices. Then I can change screens too. That's not as difficult as it sounds. So in here again, I can just on the same screen, it's going to have my 80s on 8 and then my local FM news station buttons right next to each other. On the Tesla, it's not that way. It's segmented by the radio function itself. And there's a way you can get around that. But for the most part, so to answer your question, I'm listening to satellite radio and I want to go to the FM station. It's two, maybe 3 clicks, if you will. I just got to choose there's one button called source. Okay. Do I want to go to streaming? Do I want to go to Apple Music? Do I want to go to satellite? Do I want to go to FM? So you hit that button, then you go to the FM selection, then you have to choose the station. So it's 3 clicks.
Okay. Which is pretty comparable to any system I've had. That you still have to. I mean, it's not a lot different than a TV at this stage. If I want to go to HDMI 1, I have to select HDMI 1 and then manipulate whatever is coming in through HDMI 1. So, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I got a similar experience. I have a Dodge Charger, and it's a 2018, so it's a little older technology, but touchscreens are relatively easy to access. When I had a rent-a-car, a couple months ago, I did notice quite a difference of what I wasn't used to because there was a BMW and that they've got some crazy ways of menus and screens that you had to set. I found to be very cumbersome and could be distracting. So I was being very careful, obviously not being used to it. But I do listen to radio stations and I do have to go to different modes, go to FM, AM, wherever, and then go to Sirius XM, and then I go to CarPlay. The CarPlay menu, for the most part, seems okay. I've got controls on my steering wheel as well. So that does come in handy. I hope, on the basis of this story, there are physical buttons on my car as well. And that's why I was also thinking, we've talked about this before, is if you ever wanted to swap out to a different head unit, I wouldn't do it because, you've got those physical buttons on on my car that I would not want them to become inactive because the head unit's different. So I'm okay because I have CarPlay, but there are cars that are much older that don't, and some people want to get new head units, and you gotta think about that before you make that decision. But I'm with Webb, and a lot of things that he described as far as the things that are like that. Again, hey, yeah, I like listening to the local news, and I think that's probably the same. Kansas City has a big news station, so does here in Chicago, and that's why we like to listen to that, because you want to hear what's going on in the news and not have to listen to the heavy politics of some of the channels that are on Sirius XM. But overall, I can see why Volkswagen's looking at something like this with the physical buttons. But yeah, I would like them to be limited. I like the touchscreen. I mean, but I know I've been in a Tesla before, and I know it's a massive screen, and trying to get to functionality and having to get used to it. Obviously, you are, well, because you've had it for a while. So those are my 2 cents.
I've always been just a little surprised that we haven't seen someone, Apple or anyone else in all the infotainment systems, set up something where I could say, I want to listen to Sirius XM channel, whatever, the hair metal station or the golf channel station, and assign that combination to a button, as opposed to have to jump down through the sources. And maybe somebody has done it, and I haven't had experience with it, but it just seems like such an obvious thing to do, and nobody's done it yet.
You connect on my car. You can use their voice system. There's a button on the steering wheel, and say, "Hey, I want to listen to 90.9. It's Sirius XM." It will change to it because it's using the built-in Sirius XM tuner that's in the head unit versus using the app. Now that's a whole other story going down the Sirius XM. They've done a massive change to their app that's going to probably make people more prone to want to just go online only, as opposed to having the dedicated head unit with the online as an option, depending on what they're charging. But but there are many cars that have that option already. You can use Siri too. I mean, and have it open right up as well. So that's the thing. Webb mentioned that earlier. Some people, you forget that there's voice activation. We're all in that behavior. We're so used to physically going to change something. If I want to turn the temperature on, the heat, I'm going to go to it. I don't go to the steering wheel. And a lot of these cars give that stuff, and but there's definitely some conveniences there. So it's muscle memory, remembering what it has and doesn't have.
Some people have more or less luck getting voice control to work.
That too.
Well, I agree.
Yeah,
you got to know the verbs. You got to understand each system and their own verbs to figure out what you want them to do. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right, Webb. Heck, we see that with our TVs, because I now have a Fire TV, and I can use the voice control with a lot of success if I learn how to tell it what I want it to do.
Right.
So,
but if you're driving, the chance of an error is more problematic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Webb, what are you holding up?
Oh, just the Apple TV remote. There's a little Siri button on the side of it. So.
Yep.
Yep.
Webb,
and I don't use it.
Sorry. Yeah. Ben?
Third time's a charm.
Yeah,
here's one other problem I have if the vehicle is touchscreen only. And we saw this to almost comical effect in a recent GM road test. What if the infotainment screen has either a software malfunction or B is broken? Your car is basically bricked without some kind of physical backups.
Great point.
It did happen to me, and I ended up having to get the stock head unit replaced when I first got the car, and it was freaking me out. I mean, all of a sudden driving along, and all of a sudden the system's rebooting. Like what? or it'd be frozen. You couldn't get access to anything. I mean, you still have physical button access, but there you go. Yeah, I agree with you.
But it seems like
on the Tesla,
for example, the Teslas all have screens, and there's a couple million of them driving around now, and that doesn't seem to be a problem.
The second thing you learn by owning a Tesla is that if you hold both buttons down on the steering wheel, it reboots the software system. Now, remember, on all cars, I don't care which one it is that the drivetrain computer is separate from
Right.
what I'm going to call the infotainment. That's by law; it has to be that way. Has to. But yeah, it's the second or third thing you learn on Tesla is how to reboot the damn thing, because you will have to reboot it at least once every week, 10 days.
Tesla has Control-Alt-Delete on the steering wheel.
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
Now you can do that while you're driving down the road at 80 miles an hour, but you're going to lose the speedometer. You can still drive, but you can't figure out how fast you're going.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Probably
detail.
done that before. The old cars, when the speedometer would be flickering, you wouldn't know how fast you were going. We've been there.
Yeah. that was a great story to tell the cops after they pulled you over.
Yeah. Oh, my speedometer just was off.
Yeah. More MacVoices conversations coming up next time. I'm Chuck Joyner. As always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.